Okay, so it's exactly 5 p.m. by my time. I want to say a big welcome to every mentee here, and of course to our mentor and Mr. Dennis here this evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to week six. That's right. This is our joint session where we have all our mentees together for this particular session. It's a combined class. I think the last time you had something like this was during the onboarding session where you all had to go to your various courses for this program. At this point, we're all back together for one combined class. Hello, Mr. Joe. Good evening, sir. You
Good to see you. God's
too,
love.
sir.
Good
Good
to
to see
see
you too, sir.
you. Good to see you.
Okay, so before we hear from our esteemed mentors for this evening, um, I think we just have to have a little conversation. Hello, Imabong. Good evening. How are you doing?
Hi, good evening. I'm doing okay, thank you.
That's right. Abadie.
I don't speak.
Okay, okay, okay. That's right. That's right. Okay. Please, mentees, I really want to encourage us to please turn our cameras so we get to interact. Let's do a little bit of human interactions because we're talking about human rights today and business. So let's have some human interactions. So if you're in a good space to turn on your camera, please, I would really crave your indulgence to turn on your camera so we get to see our faces. So Imabong, tell me, how has the journey been so far with Gypsy?
So the journey thus far has been very, very nice. I gave a short review, I think on week 3 or 4, of the courses where I said that Mr. Dennis has been like especially very helpful towards me. I'm always like asking questions for clarification, and he's always very, very ready to help. Even Miss Juliana Imam, she herself, took it upon herself to assist me on certain questions that I had, like as busy as she might have been, she still gave me that time, which I was very, very grateful for. My group members have been very nice, like very cooperative. Some especially like Favor Abacha and Miss Horsefall, people like that have been extremely active, and it's been a very nice opportunity.
Okay, okay, okay. I heard my group members have been quite cooperative. That's the first. Normally, some
Okay.
groups are crazy. So I like that. Please, mentees, I really want to encourage us. Do you mind turning on your cameras, please? Let's get to see our faces. I love to see more faces. If you're in a good space where your camera can come on, please, I want to crave your indulgence. Kindly turn on your camera so we get to see our face. Hello, Mary. Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, before I forget, Imabong, what course were, are you on the rather? What course do you register for?
Intellectual property.
Okay, so where do you fall in? Student, lawyer, entrepreneur, innovator, where do you fall in?
I'm an undergraduate law student.
Okay, what's
Yes.
university?
Now University of Nigeria.
Okay, okay, nice to meet you. Hello, Mary, how are you?
I'm fine,
Thank
thank you. Good evening.
Okay, Mary, please tell us briefly about you, and of course, how has 6 weeks with Gypsy been so far?
Um, okay, my name is Mary Odemi. The course I'm actually taking is ADR, and to be honest, ADR is something I'm familiar with because I did it as a course in school. Then I also took like some, should I say, some courses in school about it. So, but the my experience with Gypsy so far is that I think reading something is different from like somebody with experience teaching you. So like
That's right.
although I was familiar with some things that the our mentors have said so far, but like I've gotten like deeper, way deeper understanding. I think I really appreciate like the entire existence of this course. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Of course, that's what Gypsy does. You just got the Gypsy experience. I can say for a fact that I have experienced that experience that Gypsy is that gift that keeps on giving. You come through with so much knowledge, and then Gypsy makes it poof, really amazing. So of course, welcome. And I think I really understand more with the ADR. That was my long essay back in school. And ADR is one very profound aspect of law, whereby we're looking at a lot of lawyers are into litigation. So I'm certain that Jiipcc has done a very good job with that. So Mary, really, really nice having you on the program.
Thank you very
Okay, so
much.
you're welcome. Let me move to the first gentleman. Hello, Olayiwola. I hope I got that correctly. Olayiwola. Am I correct, please, with the read one?
Yeah, you are correct.
Okay, thank you. So please tell us briefly about you and of course what course you took for you are handling for this last quarter and something about the journey this week 6. Let's know more about your journey, please.
Oh, all right. Thank you, sir. Olaiwala Ridwan Aditiji. I'm actually a penultimate year law student from Usman Danfodio University, Sokoto, and particularly interested in intellectual property law, and that was why I actually opted for this mentorship and internship program with Jiipcc. And it has been amazing so far, and I've learned a lot of things through this program. So I've been able to deepen my understanding about intellectual property. So let me just lay emphasis on what Mary just said now, so that learning theoretically is actually different from learning practically. So I can say learning with Jiipcc has been a practical learning. So compared to just reading, so when someone who is extensively experienced in a field of knowledge explains something for you, so you get to know better about that particular, study. And I can say that this is my testimony with Jiipcc so far. So I've been able to expand the scope of my understanding on IPO. So, and it has actually given me an edge over my peers, so who are also into intellectual property. So it's actually I've gained hands-on experience. So with Jiipcc, and it's much more appreciative.
That's right. I thank God for how much growth you've had with the Jiipcc. And do not forget that one cardinal rule of Jiipcc is as you get the knowledge, spread the word. Write about it, talk about it. Do not keep it to yourself, because that's the thing with knowledge. When knowledge comes, you have to spread it out. You have to make people know that you have this knowledge, you know this thing. That way it gets you recognized, it gets you seen. And I'm really grateful that I'm seeing more students for this quarter, because it shows that there's so much future for our society, basically, when it comes to this very or different type of courses we're handling here with Jiipcc. So Ola, it's really, really awesome having you on the program. So I think I'll just take two more people before we call on our mentor for today. Hello, Erica. Good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Okay, so Erica, kindly tell us more about you and let's know how your journey with Jiipcc has been for the past 6 weeks.
Well, my name is Erica, and I'm a 300-level law student of Bancroft University, and I opted for the intellectual property mentorship, and it has been very enlightening so far. And I just started doing intellectual property as a course in school, and I love it so much. And that love stemmed from the Jiipcc mentorships. So I am extremely grateful for this opportunity.
That's nice. That's nice. That's really lovely to hear. Really, really lovely to hear. Okay. So I think just one last person. I'm checking my time. So one last person. Hello, Janet. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you, sir.
Okay, so Janet, very briefly, tell us about yourself and your journey with Jiipcc so far.
Okay, I'm Adiosola Funmilayo Janet. I'm a final year student of law, University of Lagos. So my journey with Jiipcc has been really enlightening. My course with them was entertainment law and business. So it's a course that we don't do in school. I don't think there's a course like that in school. So that's why I decided, okay, I'm going to learn that on this program, and it has really been enlightening. Some things that I never actually knew existed actually is what I'm learning. And the mentors that they brought, or that Jiipcc brought, they are just, I don't know how to put it, like they are just too good at what they do. and they know how to explain, they know how to teach. They don't lecture, they teach because they make sure you understand. And that's really, really enlightening for me and educating for me. So
Thank you so much, Janet. Thank you. Like I said before, that's a Jiipcc experience. Most often, when you go through Jiipcc, you lack words to describe what you've been through, what you've experienced. I'm a first-hand experience, particular of that blessing, and I really can tell that Jiipcc gives you that experience. Okay, so mentees, I think I'll take a pause for on this for now. We'll do more on this during the closing ceremony. But right now, we need to move into the discourse for today. It's week 6, and we're looking at human rights and business. Do not forget that Jiipcc is still taking our free law clinic. Yes. So run through some quick announcements. So we have our free legal clinic for creatives, entertainers, athletes, innovators, and of course, startups. Do you know someone who is a creative or entertainer, an athlete, an innovator, or probably just a startup who wants to do really well? Or are you that person? Listen, take huge advantage of the 20 minutes free consultation with professionals. I was telling someone today that, listen, to get my time to consult me for just a few minutes, I bill you now. So imagine getting 20 minutes with a free professional, let me put it this way, a professional for free. That's a whole lot of money. Exactly. And you're not paying a dime for it. So please, you can also submit your contracts for review. So Jiipcc is doing all that. Wow, Jiipcc always setting the pace with good innovations. So let's spread the word. Let's spread the word. There's free legal clinic. So anyone who wants to partake of it should just go through, they can do the right registrations and get their free consultations for 20 minutes. Get someone speaking with you for 20 minutes. That's a whole lot of time. Your life could just be put on the right track. Okay, so do not forget that you can also follow us on Jiipcc through our various platforms and through various social media platforms on LinkedIn, on Twitter, that's X, on YouTube. Of course, check us through on YouTube. You can find past videos of our sessions. Also on Instagram and Facebook, just check Jiipcc over there, Jiipcc, and you get to know more about the program, see previous sessions, and also just have a great time with Jiipcc. Okay, so let's move into today's session. Our mentor for today is not new to the Jiipcc program at all. In fact, we would say he is a legacy in Jiipcc. He's a grandfather, a godfather, a great-grandfather, everything in one. And it's always a pleasure having him with us every time. That's right. So many of you might know him. For those who do not, I'll just go quickly into his profile. We have Mr. Joseph Obo. So Obo Joseph spent 12 years with the National Human Rights Commission and rose to the rank of Chief Legal Officer with core duties relating human rights mainstreaming into legislation, review of government policy with human rights in mind, as well as providing pro bono human rights services to the less privileged. Mr. Joseph is currently leading the expansion project of foreign partnerships for Nigerian company, an online company registration platform, which presently has delivered about 2,000 incorporations for clients both in Nigeria and abroad. He acted as the Group Board Secretary of Bethsaida Africa Development PLC, an investment and financial services company in Nigeria. He's a mentor, co-founder of Jiipcc Academy, as well as the president of South Korea International Corporation Association of Nigeria. Joseph has an LLM in Information Technology and Telecommunication Law from the Strathclyde University, Glasgow, Scotland, and has attended several courses across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Listen, if you're part of Jiipcc family, you know that Mr. Joseph is the brains, the heart of this particular program, and it's always an honor to listen to him. If you also follow some of their discourse on human rights, he's a leading expert when it comes to human rights. Here at Jiipcc, we always bring the best, and only the best will do. So please, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I would want to welcome our mentor for today, Mr. Joseph Obo, to take off the floor and give us an outstanding presentation on human rights and business. Mr. Joe, over to you, sir. Welcome again to today's session.
Thank you, Mr. Gottslov, and I really want to appreciate everyone for being on the session today. I have a slide presentation, but most times I don't do too well with slides, but I'll do the best that I can to follow through. The slides definitely will be available to as many persons who would like to at least just sip on some additional knowledge. Yeah, so basically the area of human rights and business, it's necessarily not a new area, but it's a recent area in that sense. Basically, what I mean is that the human rights and business landscape is gaining some level of traction within Nigeria, and to that extent, the National Human Rights Commission, where I worked for about 12 years before I resigned my job to do a whole lot of other things. I gathered a lot of experience within human rights in itself, and from my profile, I've worked with several companies. I've served on a group of companies board. I've also served on several other companies, individual companies on their board, and I fully understand what it means when you talk about human rights issues within the boardroom is almost totally absent. But one of the things that you find basically has to do with the fact that a lot of companies have corporate social responsibility obligations that they carry out, especially the multinational companies, that's very big companies that have maybe their headquarters in other countries. If you want to understand what the MNC, basically multinational companies, are about, you can look at companies like MTN from South Africa doing business in Nigeria. There are diverse other companies of that nature, especially within the oil and gas space, within the extractive industry. You have a whole lot of companies that are in Nigeria doing business. But initially, like I said, the issue around human rights or the prospects of human rights is something that is gradually creeping into boardrooms where those decisions are actually being made. Because the reality is, if you talk about human rights, the average Nigerian should understand what human rights is, the rights that accrue to us as a result of our humanity. We have all of that. And if you want to break human rights down further, you have the economic, social, political rights. You have a whole lot of rights, classifications of rights that people enjoy in different categories. For example, a friend of mine recently arrived from Korea, and he told me he was like on the streets of Seoul in Korea. He came in early this week, and he's like, you have access to the internet, for example. In some European countries, having access to the internet is a human right. Like, it's that serious, it's that important. The state is part of that whole journey. Companies are part of the journey, and the individuals themselves, they demand that the government keep to some of those rules, regulations, obligations to the citizens of that particular country. So basically, when you talk about human rights and business, one of the very core things that you would need to understand has to do with the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. So these UN Guiding Principles, there are several principles within the UNGP. If we go into that, the 40 minutes that I have here today, I doubt we can't even finish the slide presentation, but I'm going to do the best that I can to ensure that you have at least a basic knowledge of what the UNGP really is. And the UNGP, I would call it a Bible of responsibilities in that sense, a Bible of responsibilities with the meaning of how companies are supposed to conduct themselves, how states are supposed to conduct themselves, and also the remedies that accrue to citizens of a particular country as a result of certain interactions within the space of business and human rights. One of the things that I would like to share, just a moment. Okay, I think I lost the slide for a moment. Yeah. So I'll just tell a brief story so that we can get some perspective. Then maybe we can use this story as a case study to be able to look at, what the UNGP is striving to achieve A lot of countries, especially in Europe has gone 1,000 miles ahead of the rest of the world, especially when you are looking at issues with respect to UNGP's GP. There are laws, there are recent laws, recent directives, EU directives within this area of human rights and business, that protect the end user, which is you and I, the individuals, like European citizens, and some of the laws that they have, basically, the reach goes beyond Europe as a continent. For example, if you have a European company doing business in Nigeria, for example, they would have to report on certain human rights, frameworks. They will have to report on certain human rights activities that they have been able to mainstream into their business operations, with the aim and the goal of ensuring that every company carries out its activities, bearing in mind that there might be a reputational consequence, there might be other consequences that the company might suffer, especially in terms of their reporting. This issue about due diligence is taken very seriously in other climes. We are getting it in Nigeria. We are doing well. We are doing very well, and we will continue to do well. But it's actually on us as individuals. I know for sure that the United Nations, that's the UNDP, United Nations Development Program, they had like some interactions with the National Human Rights Commission sometime last year with respect to Nigeria adopting a national action plan on human rights and business. There is already a draft document, a draft national action plan. You can find it online. You can read about it. The document is actually very rich. We are waiting for, I'm not exactly sure if that document has scaled through all the other processes before it becomes useful for public consumption in that sense. But the document is rich. It talks about several things. It talks about the state's duty, the duty of the state to protect you and I. It also talks about the obligations that companies should have in dealing with staff, in dealing with communities, in dealing with stakeholders, in terms of mainstreaming human rights into their activities. Then it also talks about remedies, because you cannot talk about human rights and business, without thinking about the remedies. Where those infractions occur, what is the state supposed to do? In fact, the state's responsibility does not even commence when the infractions occur. It's a preventive responsibility. The state is supposed to prevent certain things from happening. And how does the state go about doing some of these things? How does the state, like if you are in Nigeria, and you would know that laws are necessarily not the issues, when you're looking at the Nigerian peculiar situation. We don't have a challenge of laws. We have beautifully worded laws. I remember while I was still working in the National Human Rights Commission, I used to love going to the National Assembly a lot, because one of the things that I did in my department had to do with legislative liaison, where we liaise with senators, honorable members, Senate and House of Representatives committees, just to ensure that at the end of the day, we are able to look at the laws that the National Assembly is making, and we look at those laws from an angle of human rights. We try to mainstream human rights as much as possible, into some of these legislations. So all of those things on the back end, a lot of persons may not necessarily know, but on the government aspect of things, so much goes into getting the policy documents right and getting the legislations right. You may not believe that, because there is so much shrouded, in the public space about what happens in the National Assembly and all of that. But the beauty is that the National Assembly does its job. I can say that. I'm not trying to hold breath, but I'm just saying that in terms of human rights mainstreaming into our laws, that is going on every bill that comes out from the National Assembly. So you can almost tell that in terms of legislation, Nigeria is actually getting it right. But you would now realize that in terms of the implementation, there are several, skirmishes, hiccups here and there that needs to be looked into. So when you're looking at a state's duty to protect, I would want us to quickly look at this scenario that happened in Lagos. I think it was a traveler the Murtala Mohammed International Airport. A traveler arrived and he walked into, he didn't walk, of course, he was on a wheelchair, and he tried to gain access, maybe to purchase food or something from a company. I don't want to mention the name, and he walked into that eatery and he was denied access. He was denied access on the account of the fact that if he pulls his wheelchair into that particular space, it might occupy space. Some persons might not be able to make purchases, and all of that. And at the end of the day, it became like a huge social media buzz and all of that. Even the Federal Airport Authority, that's FAN had to come into the entire issue. They shut down the they shut down the eatery for a while. And I'm sure that company would have had to now start thinking around having to do some level of human rights due diligence on the activities of the company, especially in terms of training of the staff, because it was a staff action. That staff was acting on behalf of the company in question. So we see all of these infractions day to day. Day to day, we see some of all these infractions, and much of the time, especially when you look into the extractive sector, for example, you will find out that much of what is going on within that space, there are a lot of violations. In fact, there was another issue reported by the business and human rights.bhr.com or something like that, one of those websites, but it was a real story captured also by the Nigerian media and also international media, how that women that work in mines, those who manage those mining operations, in some cases, would demand sex before certain women are given the right to work within the mines. You can imagine how dangerous a mine is in itself. Then you can now imagine the fact that somebody is looking for a job and the CV necessarily doesn't matter. Other factors now play a very predominant role before people can get what they need to be able to survive and to be able to exist. So these are actually the issues. So when we are talking about what the UNGP has tried to achieve, and we're talking about human rights and business, basically what we try to streamline into is the fact that beyond holding the government accountable to create the enabling environment for human rights to thrive within the business space, we also understand the fact that companies also have a very huge role to play. A lot of companies necessarily may not rate human rights in that sense until they begin to have reputational crisis. Imagine the scenario I painted earlier on. You would now find out that companies will now be looking for lawyers, they'll be looking for PR agents, they'll be looking for different skill sets to be able to assist them to put their image back on track. So if, for example, you have a company that took their time to ensure that they engage a professional that understands business and human rights, they carry out training programs, their staff would have to sign up to documents stating that they understand their responsibilities in line with the actions or inactions that take place within their roles in that company. Then you would now understand that, oh, wow, this company is really doing a great job. But what I've seen basically from experience within this area is that most of these multinational corporations, most of these companies, including very big companies in Nigeria here, they understand the language of corporate social responsibility. I, for one, have been in several boardrooms. When we're talking about CSR, people see it as a means to award contracts, maybe to get certain things done. People begin to play the internal, company politics and all of that. But, CSR is just one aspect of meeting the demands of business and human rights. The major thing that is basically lacking is the knowledge factor. The knowledge factor is missing in a lot of boardrooms. People understand human rights through different lenses, and there needs to be more conversations around issues of this kind. If, for example, maybe you go on LinkedIn, you just search for BHR on LinkedIn, you would check companies like maybe Mercedes-Benz, for example, in Germany. They have a very robust BHR system. Like, you know, it's almost like it's like a swag to say, okay, you are operating maybe under the Mercedes-Benz brand, for example. You are representing them. You see designations on human rights and business. You necessarily don't find that so much here in Nigeria. I don't think I've seen much. I've had cause to meet a friend of mine who went to my university. I think he works with either ECOWAS or AU, and he's doing a lot of work also within the business and human rights space. But that space is not a saturated space yet in Nigeria, because the knowledge is still evolving. So basically, slide 3 is in front of me. The business impact on society. So when you look at that statement in itself, what's the impact of business? Of course, there are a lot of businesses, they make life easy for us. Imagine a company like Dangote, for example. Imagine we didn't have Dangote, doing business in Nigeria. Maybe Nigeria would have still been running on a lot of third world principles and frameworks. I don't necessarily see Nigeria as a third world country. I see it as a great country. We have the potential to do a whole lot more than we are doing currently. But when you look at the impact of some of these companies in terms of the services that they provide, you cannot underestimate the impact of these companies in the daily lives of people. So it's important that companies that are that big, even the smaller ones, people that do business on very low-key level, middle level, on the global stage, it's important that those companies understand what their obligations are within the entire human rights structure. So that's actually very, very important. Business actions can harm human rights. Of course, they can harm human rights. I would also tell another story, because in this space, we try to track what's going on, what's happening, so that we can basically understand how to respond to certain issues and how to provide context for people to really understand. Because sometimes you might be looking at an issue from a human rights and business perspective, and somebody is looking at issues of tribe, they are looking at religion, they are looking at ethnicity, they are looking at a whole lot of things. Let's even talk about land rights, for example. I know of a university somewhere in the south of this country, and like I said, I won't mention names. The way people are mentioning names these days, and court cases are flying all around. So I want to respect myself. I will not mention names, but of course, a human rights, professional should have that courage of mentioning names should exist. But for the purpose of ensuring that we do not derail the objectives of Jiipcc Academy, I'll keep it very simple. So this particular university, with the support of maybe the community leadership or the local leadership of the area, they decided to allocate vast portions of land to that particular university without the consent of those that originally owned the land. You can imagine that kind of a situation, so much chaos. If this particular university had knowledge of human rights and business, for example, especially mainstreaming that or trying to zoom our focus into land rights, you would now definitely understand that the company should have sought some kind of at least additional support, additional understanding, talking to professionals like myself and other persons in the field to be able to advise them on the proper way of land acquisition. So you now see that the community, the university are having a lot of issues. So much is going on. The area sometimes is safe, sometimes it's not safe, because they have necessarily not mainstreamed human rights into the activity of that particular university. So these things happen. There are land rights issues. There are a lot of issues. Look at the Niger Delta, for example. Major companies, multinational corporations coming to invest in that region. At the end of the day, the entire place is denigrated, is degraded. It's not a place that, some European dogs will not live in some parts of the Niger Delta. It will be declared unsafe for animals. But you find out that some of these companies have so much frustrated the will of the people. They have so much, I'm not necessarily blaming the companies, because most of these issues, they are basically intertwined. There are a lot of context within which you can look at the issues in question. But the point I'm trying to make is that companies have a duty, they have an obligation to seek out knowledge, to seek out the right knowledge that would enable them to take the right action and ensure that if they cannot eradicate harm, they can minimize it. They can minimize it. Because when you look at Nigeria, for example, you know, a lot of communities are vulnerable. When you go back to the villages, you know, the hinterlands, and you're looking at communities where some of us come from, even though development is catching up, but you still realize that, you know, the poverty level is high in a lot of places. And of course, where you find poverty, you would find a lot of vulnerabilities. You know, people don't even mind. They don't mind just collecting little stipends, and they forget they can even give out their land, they can give out everything. They are just thinking about survival. So the goal for us basically is to ensure that companies understand the role that they need to play within this triangle. I look at this triangle from the government angle, from the company angle, then from the individual angle. That's you and I. How does the action or inaction of government or the action or inaction of companies affect we the people? You know, how does that whole process interplay? So that's what human rights and business basically strives to achieve. It strives to achieve an equilibrium between the action of government, the obligation of companies, and the remedies that are available for you and I, for persons who are victims of the violations, basically. So that's what we're really talking about. We can quickly move to the next slide. Let's see what's hanging in slide 4. I'm trying, yeah, okay, we've done a whole lot of talk about the 3 pillars of the UNGP. So basically, the state's duty to protect, government must protect individuals from human rights abuses through policies, regulations, and law. And one of the things that I've said basically is that Nigeria does not lack the laws. I stand to be corrected. We have beautiful legislations, beautiful policies. I'm not saying that there is really no need for an upgrade on certain things, but on the basics of this issue, especially as it relates to human rights and business, I think we've done quite well. Going through the National Action Plan by the National Human Rights Commission, that's the draft document. Like I said, you can go online, you can download that document, just read it, enjoy it, understand it. You know, just have the knowledge. You know, you might necessarily not be a human rights person. It might be like something that you may consider in the future, especially if you want to work within the international space. I think this area of human rights and business, it's growing, it's developing. Europe has adopted it. So much is happening within that space that whoever feels like they can key into this space, you know, you can just start studying around it. No big deal at all. So basically, the states have to do what the state must do. And right now, one other thing that I will mention that is not in these 3 pillars has to do with the activities of non-state actors. I would say that because, for example, in Abuja, we have a very popular radio station. It's called Brekete Family. It's like human rights radio. You know, the human rights radio under the ordinary president, President Ahmed, I can't remember his other name, but I know the current president, yeah, the ordinary president. He's doing a lot of work calling agencies. In fact, he calls individuals, he calls companies, he calls government officials, he calls everybody, you know, to that place of understanding that human rights must be taken very seriously. So he is necessarily not representing the state, more of like an NGO, but he's doing a very good job. And if you watch any of his sessions, maybe especially on a Facebook Live, you would really understand the fact that so much can be done, especially within the duty to protect. Is very clear. I'm not trying to mix that up with the activities of non-state actors. I'm just trying to say that there are other persons not mentioned within these 3 pillars that are actually throwing more light into what business and human rights basically is really about. So we can now go to the obligation, or better yet, the responsibility of states to respect, of companies to respect. Let's still stay on slide 4. I would see how I can muzzle that out as quickly as possible. That's slide 4. Yes. So companies need to do better. Companies need to do better. Companies must avoid infringing on human rights. For example, I read a report about a particular, what's it called now? A particular cement factory, not the popular one that we might be averting our minds to know, not at all. And there are issues around the company land grabbing. There are issues around the environment. People cannot breathe properly. A whole lot of issues, noise pollution, air pollution, a whole lot of these infractions. And would we now say that companies that are acting within that particular space and in that line of business, would we say they don't necessarily owe the communities or the environment where they do business? Would we say they don't owe them any responsibility? So what the UNGP is trying to say is that companies must be responsible. They must also assist this particular framework that we identified earlier on to ensure that there is respect for human rights within the operations that they carry out. That's very, very important, because if the companies do not do what they are meant to do, basically, that means there's a lapse. And why we now have the state's duty to protect is where we notice that there are infractions, the state can call the companies to order. The state can call the companies to order. If we have a very like a bulldog kind of maybe human rights commission with the teeth, not just to smile, but with the teeth to bite. If we are seeing the National Human Rights Commission biting as it should, I can tell you that these issues around human rights and business would definitely go a long way. But I can also say for sure that during my short stay of over a decade within that particular system where we had that duty to protect, there were several trainings with companies, there were several engagements with stakeholders, and I'm very sure that all that is still going on right now and much more. So that's actually very important. Then also in terms of access to remedy, when your right is breached, for example, when you are the person who is now at the receiving end of human rights infractions, do you have the clear pathway to be able to say, okay, these are the things that I must do to assess remedies. These are the things. This is the structure within the office. If the office does not provide that particular structure within its own management, what other avenues exist for you as an individual, for you and I as individuals, to be able to assess remedy when our rights have been abused or violated, as the case may be? So it's very, very important that much of all of these are put in place so that this framework actually makes sense. Because this framework basically has to work not just in the interest of the state or of companies, but it must work in the interest of you and I, individuals like you and I, working in companies and being affected by the activities that companies carry out in terms of their mandate to make profit. So we can hit up on slide 5 very quickly. I'm almost running out of time, but I will see what I can do within the next 5 to 10 minutes. So like we've already established, the state has to enact and enforce laws that require businesses to respect human rights. We have those laws in terms of domestic laws. If you look at the majority of all the acts that we have, like the NCC Act, for example, several other laws, just think of any law that has come into being within the past 10 years. Just be sure to a very great extent that that entire whole mainstreaming I talked about earlier has been done on most of these legislations. Then providing guidance and support to businesses on respecting human rights. I'm sure the Human Rights Commission already does this, monitoring and regulating corporate behavior. For example, other regulators beyond the National Human Rights Commission, they carry out some of these roles and responsibilities. And don't forget, we mentioned that there's currently a National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights draft document that the Nigerian government has put out there. It's for your consumption. If you just want to know much more about this, you can actually download that document and read through. So let's just quickly hit up on slide 5. I have over 20 slides, but let's see. Wherever we stop there. You can look up the slides for further understanding of this subject area. So for example, like in Europe, for example, Germany to be precise, and other European countries, issues around human rights due diligence is taken extremely seriously. As a company, in fact, there are a lot of companies that have arisen out of the new reforms within the business and human rights space across Europe. A lot of companies are providing services to multinational corporations, even to companies that do business within Europe that have impact across the world. You know, so it's a very big industry. That industry is coming closer to Africa, and as many people who are interested, you can begin to prepare yourself to be able to play within that particular space. So companies should identify, prevent, and mitigate adverse human rights impacts. How do you identify without knowledge? That means that the knowledge has to go forth first. So there has to be proper knowledge, there has to be proper information, training. Companies need to carry that out. People need to be aware of what all of this is really about in the first place. Then, of course, in terms of implementation of policies to assess human rights risks and providing training, we've talked about this already. We also talked about embedding human rights into corporate governance beyond corporate social responsibility activities. That's also very key, very important. Then beyond this also, in terms of assessment, because anything that you don't measure doesn't get measured. You know, if you're not measuring, if you're not carrying out like a risk assessment, for example, within the operations of a company, if you don't do that, then of course you wouldn't know what the risks are until issues arise, there are problems, people begin to run in different directions. The image of that company is already damaged and battered at the end of the day. So we can move to slide 7. I don't know, if you have any questions as I'm speaking, please feel very free. You can raise up your hand, you can ask questions. I'm happy to respond to few questions as I begin to wrap up. Yeah, so human rights due diligence in practice. Like I said, this is necessarily not something very popular within Nigeria. We have to call it spade a spade. Work is ongoing to bring this to the fore. But there are several other assessments that companies carry out that may have like a human rights feel to it, but it may necessarily not be called human rights due diligence. I've not had any company within the past couple of years that reached out to me and mentioned the word human rights due diligence. But in Europe, you find this is commonplace. It's very commonplace. We are getting there, and we will get there in the interest of all Nigerians, basically. So assessing human rights impact, companies must understand the risk and they must conduct assessments. Before you can understand the risk factor, you must be able to like say, okay, this is the operation of this company. This is a garment making factory, for example, maybe somewhere situated in Kaduna State, for example. You have a garment making factory there. What are the things? Do people engage in maybe child labor, for example? Are children involved in making garments in that particular factory? What other things could spark up, human rights issues? For example, you own a mining site. Maybe you own a mining site somewhere in Edo State, for example. You know, what are the steps, the recruitment steps? What is the recruitment policy? Is having sex with the women that look for jobs within those mining sites, is it part of the policy of that particular company? So it's important to conduct an assessment to understand the risk factors that could arise where companies are not getting it right. It's very key, it's very important. Of course, you need to track, you need to monitor, you must evaluate, you must take action to address the identified risk. Like the example that we cited earlier on, where we talked about the fact that somebody on a wheelchair was not granted access into an eatery, and because of that, FAN had to close down the place. You know, so those are ways through which, although that's the state's duty in that particular sense, but we can see that the knowledge around these areas, they are coming up. Sometimes there are some government agencies that may have certain roles to play until things happen before they can now say, okay, oh, we have this mandate to do ABC. But before things go wrong, people should be able to understand what their roles are. Companies must be able to understand what their roles are. The government must also be able to understand what its obligations are. in that particular sense. Then the last line here, in terms of transparency and reporting on efforts to mitigate risk. One thing I can say for sure, there's this organization, NATI. NATI, you can read up NATI reports online. It will provide a lot of context to us here. That's just for additional study, just to have the knowledge. You know, you might be a 300 level law student, and maybe you may use some kind of language, and your colleagues will be like, wow, this person may be reading some kind of very interesting books and all that. So this is basically for additional knowledge. We can hit up on slide 8. Let's see what's there. Let's see what's on slide 8. So access to remedy. I think we've already treated this to a point. One of the things that stands out for me, basically, on this particular slide, has to do with the fact that remedies can be judicial or non-judicial. We understand the judicial aspect, you know, is an expensive route. How many communities can really afford a senior advocate to, you know, to take up companies on their behalf? So we can see that even if we have solutions, but how practical are these solutions? When you now go through the non-judicial route, can you get the right amount or the right level of compensation? Imagine me, for example. No, let me not use myself as an example. Imagine a puppy trying to negotiate with an elephant. That's what we find on the field most of the time. People who are defenseless, people who are tired, people who are hungry, people who are poor. How can they rise up to, you know, corporations that have the financial capacity to be able to almost wipe everything out and all that? So you would just realize that even on the non-judicial aspect of trying to assess remedy, people might not necessarily still be getting the right remedies that they deserve because they are fighting against powerful actors within the system. So it's a solution, but at the same time, we still need to look at ways through which the state can still provide additional support in areas of this kind. Yeah, we can proceed to the next slide. Yeah, we can. Yes. Okay. State-based judicial mechanism, courts, tribunals. Yes. There's something I want to mention. Based on the National Human Rights Commission's Act, there's a provision within that act that gives the commission the power to act as it has like quasi-judicial powers. It can sit almost as a court and register its decisions with the High Court. When the High Court accepts that decision, it will almost, better yet, it will be as though it was a decision of the High Court. So the National Human Rights has that particular power. So it's the responsibility of the commission, one way or the other, to enlighten people. Of course, this is still an enlightenment channel. I'm just saying this because there might be issues that people can definitely take to the commission. The commission can look into those concerns, can look into those grievances, and can set up this kind of a system that would that has the ability to not put so much pressure on the victims now, so that they can get justice through a means that would not be extremely expensive and all that. So the National Human Rights Commission has that power guaranteed by its act, and I want to see much more beyond maybe issues around SARS and all that. I believe that much more can actually be done to see how we can test the system, test the legal system within the National Human Rights Commission. Let's see where the loopholes are, and let's keep building from there. That would definitely help us. It will help Nigerians, and it will be a very useful tool, even to resolve issues around business and human rights, basically. So non-judicial, we've talked about this, collaboration with businesses. There has to be, of course, collaboration, because much of the time, government cannot do it alone. Everybody's hand needs to be on track to get things done in the interest of, you know, the common man. So we can move to slide 10. I think I saw 2 questions that came in, or is it 2 comments?
It was more of a question. It was more of a question. Okay. So it was more of a question.
Okay, can you take that?
Yes.
Can you take the question?
Can we have questions probably after your session? So we can just have
Okay,
them during the question time, please.
okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, sir.
So
Thank you.
let me just continue with these community feedback systems for multinational supply chains. In fact, this is already at work in Europe, where companies are necessarily not relying on maybe reporting systems within their own independent, within their own company structures. They're also making use of other channels of getting feedback to ensure that they are doing their business within an ethical framework. They are doing business within an ethical framework, and at the end of the day, everybody, people are complying. Compliance, of course, is a very big deal in Europe. If you don't have a compliance mindset, it's better you don't even do business at all before you get bankrupt and all that litigation here and there, people running up and down, people even going to jail, things like that. At least in climes where the law works, it's good to get the work done so that you don't get even with the law, basically. So corporate grievance, ensure mechanisms are accessible and transparent. This is very, very key. Transparency. There was one election. Sorry, let me digress. There was one election, I don't know if it was Kenya or South Africa, where the results were being collated like in real time, like live. We like to see, it's just like, I'm just digressing.
South Africa. South Africa.
Yeah. South Africa, right?
South Africa, yes, because I know that they dragged Nigeria that period for that particular election as well, comparing their...
So you can see transparency at work. You can see transparency at work. It's very important. It's very key. Where you have transparency issues, everybody knows what's going on per time, and there are necessarily no issues around, one person said this, he said, she said. The processes are already on ground. The mechanisms are on ground. You can easily tell the outcome because of the input. So we need to have this also within, in terms of remedies, basically. So we can move to the next slide. My time is almost up, but let me just take one or two more slides. Let's see how we go from here. This slide 11 or is this slide 10?
This is 11, slide 11.
Okay, slide 11, yeah. So business case for human rights, protecting human rights is not only a moral obligation. Of course, as a company that needs to, in fact, if you're a company that wants to start doing business, you want to do international business, basically, some of these things would definitely come up. It will definitely come up. You're doing business in Europe, for example, a lot of things will come up. You begin to see compliance from a whole new perspective. I've not even delved into issues around ESG. That's not what we're talking about here, but so much of that particular space is being built up already. And I believe that companies can take advantage of mainstreaming human rights into their operations in terms of protecting, of course, their reputation and building trust, not just locally, but internationally. Avoidance of lawsuits, we've talked about that. Reputational damage, operational disruptions. Imagine that company, for example, being shut down. They've lost some money. They should have been doing some profit at that time, and they had to start chasing a whole lot of things, talking to bloggers to say good things about the company and things like that. So when you do the right thing, basically, you would be on the right side of the law as much as possible. I'm not saying that compliance is something that you can achieve 100%. At least for those of us who practice that and all that, we see that, compliance is just like a moving river. You just keep complying as much as you can. It's very important that we have that in mind. So we can take another one or two slides before I wrap this up. Okay, 12 SDGs. We know what the SDGs are. So let's move on to another one. Let's go to slide 13. I think this is very self-explanatory. Let's go to 13. If we start on this, we might not be able to finish this. Let's go to slide 14. Sorry about this, but these are things that we can read up on our own. We can read up, and at the end of the day, we can get as much information. So I will just pick this slide. This might be our last slide for today. So the United Nations Development Program support to governments and businesses. That's already, it's a big thing in Tunisia, for example. So much has been done in Tunisia in terms of the UNDP's participation in propagating and implementing the UNGPs. You look at countries like Tunisia, countries like I think the Mediterranean countries. Nigeria is also receiving that support system. I know of Egypt. I know of Tunisia. I think, is it Congo or Central African Republic? I can't remember, but you know, the UNDP is doing so much within this area. They're also working closely in Nigeria with the National Human Rights Commission and other NGOs and other actors basically in that particular space. So this space is a space that, you know, civil society is doing so much. If you look at issues around environmental degradation and the role that companies played, you know, in I don't want to use the word messing up, but in affecting, you know, some South states in Nigeria, you would know that this kind of collaboration is very important, especially for knowledge building, so that people understand things from the mindset aspect. Then they now basically know what to do to be able to prevent much of all these human rights infractions in the communities where they serve. So yes, promoting responsible business practices, yes, facilitating capacity building, knowledge sharing, and development of national action plans. So this is the final comment for me today. I know that what the United Nations, basically, that's the UNDP, is doing in Nigeria and across several other African countries is to see how that countries that are sleeping, especially on the government angle, the UNDP is seeing how it can infuse a reawakening into some of these government institutions to come up with a national action plan on business and human rights, because that's where it all starts from. It all starts from the policy. If we can get the policy right in terms of coming up with a framework, then we can now begin to talk about implementation. We can talk about education. We can talk about a whole lot of other things. Then people that want to enter that space, you know, to become voices within this space of human rights and business, you know, they have like the background, the foundation is already created for much of these actions to come up. Finally, I wouldn't say here today that I understand, how do I put it? I wouldn't say that I understand all the issues around human rights and business everywhere in the world. No, I wouldn't say that. But the much that I've shared with you here today has been as a result of my personal study, my experience working with the National Human Rights Commission, my experience working on corporate boards of companies here in Nigeria, and several other interactions that I have with friends who work with international IGOs, international organizations that also have an incline into ensuring that human rights and business becomes the mainstay for companies to be brought into that sphere of accountability. I hope this has been useful today. Thank you very much. Mr. Goffslov, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Joseph. I would say it's really been an amazing session. I know that our mentees have so many questions, and we're going to have a lot of them coming up with, should I say, questions. Our chat box is already loaded with questions. Before we go into the questions, quickly want to just take our picture time. So I want to encourage all mentees, kindly turn on your cameras, please, for our picture time. Let's get the pictures quickly, and then we can go straight into the questions for this evening. I want to encourage you as well. I think live questions also do a whole lot of good. You can turn on your cameras to ask live questions by just using the raising of hand emoji, and we'll call on you to take on your answers. So please, let's turn on our cameras for picture time. I know we have a lot of mentees here today on the call, so I want to get a lot of us on this picture, or in this picture rather. Okay, really amazing. At least, please, you can smile. No one is violating your human rights. Please, you can smile. Okay, so once it's done, I'll be notified that we've gotten our photos so we can continue with understanding how not to violate human rights in the business space. Okay, I think that's the go ahead that we are done. So thank you very much. Thank you. So before we go back into the session to get more insight from our esteemed mentor, I want to encourage us. Listen, we have more sessions, combined sessions tomorrow. You do not want to miss them, honestly. You see how today has already been mind-blowing. A lot of you might not really come for the human rights approach. Or probably those who are not even lawyers may be thinking, what do I have to do with human rights stuff? Do not forget that this is business and human rights. We are being told that Nigeria is growing. So very soon, that's why I don't know who, those who follow this cartoonized stuff on Facebook or Instagram, Veronica. Well, you always see Veronica, I want to stay late today for work. Veronica, like, how much is my extra pay? Stuff like that. Very funny cartoonized stuff with Veronica. The same thing can happen very soon in Nigeria because we have a whole lot of violations of human rights in the business sector. We don't have a good corporate sector in our businesses. I know in America or Europe, you see things like I'll take it up with corporate. Here in Nigeria, you hear the issue of go ahead. Even in our government parastatals, we have so much violation of fundamental human rights. Even the labor law has given us so much rights to enjoy from, but we do not enjoy any protections from these rights because who knows? Who cares? Nobody. And now we're talking about human rights. Please, blessed Obeyde, do you mind muting yourself? Thank you. Okay, so that's why
Wow.
in the business space you must know how to understand fundamental rights. So you must not be a lawyer to also try to enforce some of these rights. There are rights you've been given, and Mr. Joseph has done a great job with elaborating on that and the beauty of protecting these rights and how businesses should go about it. Okay, so I'm no expert in human rights. Our expert is here, so I'll go quickly into the questions for Mr. Joseph to tackle those questions. I'll scroll up to the first one by Imabong. Oh, Imabong, your first question, would you want to ask it live or should we read from the chat box?
Oh, I can ask it live.
Please go ahead. Let's go with the first question on sexual harassment.
Okay, so my first question was, do you think that it's actually feasible to eradicate instances of sexual harassment in the workplace and then also in academics? Because we can see that in tertiary institutions, sometimes female students are pressured to engage in sexual acts for good grades. So I just wanted to know your opinion if it's actually realistic that we destroy these structures in Nigeria.
Sorry, if you can take the first part of your question again, if you don't mind. I didn't quite get you.
Okay. I was just asking, do you think it's realistic that in Nigeria we'll be able to reach the goal of destroying sexual harassment in the workplace? Like you mentioned how in the mining sector, a lot of organizations, they necessitate that women have sex with the employers before they get a job. So instances like that, do you think we can actually destroy that realistically in Nigeria?
The thing is, issues around sexual harassment in universities. At least I went to a Nigerian university, and I think on one of those years while I was in school, there was a lecturer who found himself either through an act of God or through his own actions. He found himself in the ladies' room, and they had actually set him up. So when he got there, they stripped him naked, they collected his ATM card. That's the students now, the guys that the lady told about the issue, like it was really messy. And this is a guy who was, I think he was a professor of some sort, I wouldn't mention, of course, I already promised that I was not going to mention names yesterday so that, nobody begins to drag me and all that. So I feel that these conversations are things that like the NUC definitely would have policies, universities would definitely have policies around sexual harassment and all of that. So it's not to have those beautiful policies or rules, regulations, lying inside of maybe a cupboard somewhere, and nobody is really testing out some of these policies. Because if people, even though we have to be realistic, sometimes you might cry out in instances of this nature, and at the end of the day, you end up as the person crying because of the system in itself. But I believe that people that are quiet or in the closet as a result of actions, maybe within the tertiary institution, we need to have more people coming out. There are a lot of NGOs, there are a lot of groups that support issues of this kind that will be willing to even bankroll, any legal situation that comes out of it. So if any lady or any man out there, because sexual harassment is not just the ladies, sometimes you find guys who are also sexually harassed, so it's a two-way thing. So if you're a man out there, you're a young man, a young lady, and you are facing any form of sexual harassment, I feel the first thing would be, of course, to gather enough evidence, gather enough evidence, do the best that you can. Don't, at the first attempt, you now start shouting at the rooftop. It's a good strategy in any case, but it's your choice. But I believe that you need to have enough hard evidence so that even if that particular case has to get to court or needs to get to the university senate, then you would have a fighting chance rather than maybe some hearsay, he said, she said, she said, she said, kind of a situation. So we can begin to see a lot of changes within the tertiary space if people begin to speak out. And I know for sure that the Human Rights Commission, I would always refer to the National Human Rights Commission because it's the agency of government that handles or sees that human rights of every Nigerian or foreigners living in Nigeria is protected. So that agency is open, is a public institution. Anybody can walk in there and seek help. They have experts, at least in the headquarters here in Abuja. They have a lot of experts there, people who have studied in the best of institutions. They have the practical knowledge. They have the theoretical knowledge. They have the proper mindset and training to be able to assist any Nigerian anywhere within the borders of this country, especially as it relates to issues around human rights. And it is our job to, as a community, social media has made it easy to hold, government to account and all that. So let's begin to test these models and see. But before you come out and you begin to shout sexual harassment as a man or as a woman, my personal advice, not my professional advice, but my personal advice would be that you have enough hard evidence so that you don't be the person who is just shouting alone in the desert and nobody can hear your voice. It's important to really have.
So, Mr. Joseph, okay, so I'm also going to put a kind of follow-up question to that question so you can actually elaborate on some of these things. I was seeing a movie once where they had a case, and normally in most companies you work with, the contracts you get, they always have dispute resolution clauses on the matters that must go through negotiations within the company, go through their disciplinary board and all that. And in this particular suit, in this particular movie, the lady had taken the matter to court. And then her company was saying by their dispute resolution, she must have first started off inside of the office to deal with interpersonal issues before taking it to court. So at least for enlightenment here, this is not a Nigerian movie. Now, in Nigerian sector, do you think that would work here? Looking at the fact that sexual harassment is an offense, basically, and we have criminal code, penal code that actually give series of convictions for this particular kind of offense. So that means that makes it an offense against the state, not just the person in this case. And we have labor laws as well against such harassment in the workplace. So do you think one has to obey the contract they have with the company that says every dispute must first be passed through the company before you can take it to court? And also all the mandatory statutory periods you must give them before the matter is brought to court?
Well, you already answered the question in a way, because we cannot say that a contract that violates the rights of an individual would now be superior to the laws made by the National Assembly or the State House of Assembly, as the case may be. So the laws would definitely have some overriding precedent, in some of these in these instances. This is also not to say that, because it's not everything that is a crime that you now, practically speaking, it's not everything that is a crime that you find the police show up. It's not everything that is a crime that you find the police show up. I've had, I don't want to bring police matter into this conversation, so I'm just trying to be as civil as possible, but the beauty is that if you ever have to find yourself in a place where, a contract that you've entered into is violating your rights, you can seek advice from the National Human Rights Commission. There are people there who have been paid, who are there for you. They are there for you. So please use this channel. Use this channel. Talk to, sector-specific NGOs that are also out there that can provide support to you and advise you appropriately on how to go forward, So these things are actually there, but we need to find out, we need to be able to use the system to achieve our goals, basically. Because you cannot have an agency that opens 5 days in a week. Sometimes even on weekends, some people go to work and we are not engaging them. So the public also needs to be able to engage the system and have faith that the system would work in your interest. I think where a lot of Nigerians have issue is the issue of faith. But just have faith, that you don't lose anything by having faith. Just have faith that, that the government has your back and the National Human Rights Commission has your back. Believe first. Test the system, then you give your feedback. Don't begin to give feedback when you have not tested the system.
Okay, words of wisdom there. Test the system and then you give your feedback. But do not forget that right now, a lot of online dragons are going on. As you test the system, ensure you tag us on most of those postings that come online. We want to get the gist first hand. Mr. Yusuf has been running from calling names because right now in Nigeria, names are flying and it's a whole lot. It's a whole lot. Okay. So I see some hands. I think I'll have some live questions. Hello, Blessed. Good evening. Welcome. If you don't mind, please turn on your camera if you can, where you are, and then ask your question, please. Thank you. Mary, get ready. You'll be next, please. No, sorry, Mary Odeyemi. So, Blessed, go ahead, please.
Come again. Okay,
No,
yes.
Blessed, go ahead with the question.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. I can hear you, sir.
Please. Yes, please.
All right. Now, sir, about the whole issue of sexual harassment. I remember back then a certain situation occurred about a lecturer who I'm quite familiar with, and I'm acquainted with. His name is.
I think we're really struggling to hear you cohesively. Am I going to having that challenge?
I can hear him well, so as well. I think it's
okay,
breaking.
Please, do you mind ensuring that? Oh, I think probably a network problem or something. Still the same problem, please.
Yeah, you can go ahead. Just let me try if I can pick it.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
All right. So as I was saying, sir, what happened was I got from Lotto, where our most lecturers they take external courses, elective courses in back courses. Now, one of these our lecturers now, what was that doing in one of his classes, I can't remember the faculty, a frank has happened in the class. So whether the students were trying to rush into the hall to take their favorite seats, or they were fighting. I can't remember really recall what happened. But the major highlight of that frank was that in the process of trying to intervene or separate them, he grabbed the ladies, and that grabbing was not accidental. It was perfectly meditated. I was not there. I'm saying we all know because why this lecturer has an issue of faith. But it's the truth now. As far as it is, what actually started me? Despite, of course, I said I'm acquainted with this lecturer, but as a student, there's not too much I can do. This girl was taken to the Senate and she was prosecuted based on that. like
Wow.
with no head for mind. That was that she was born. Now, such a situation now, what can that get into? Because it cannot be proven that the man actually got raped. But we the students, based on who the man is, we know he did it. We know he did it. So
Most of these things, most of these things are evidence-based, because you cannot take emotions to the court, you cannot take emotions to court. Cases are not won based on the emotional appeal. That's why it's always very important that, we have the right knowledge before we begin, knowledge of gathering data, gathering information, gathering evidence. Don't somebody touch your, I don't even know how to use my mouth to say some of these things. You are in that particular, sexual harassment environment, do your best, do the best that you can to get evidence.
Sorry,
Do
sir.
the best.
Sorry for interrupting. I feel to tell you that why she was actually hospitable, that she responded with this slap. That was hospitated because when the that slap.
Okay.
That when she landed the
Yeah, I think you said it before. Before you said she was because exactly now, this is a reason for her being rusticated.
You need evidence because when you are in a male-dominated system as a woman, somehow you're stepping into that room, the odds are already against you. So if you're coming before you come out to that space, before your bunkmate even knows what's going on, have your hard evidence. Have your hard evidence. The one that, like the story I shared, the guy was naked. He was in the student's house. What's the professor doing in the student's house, for God's sake? What's he doing there? Did he disappear there? So have your hard evidence. That would help. That would help to protect you. And I want to also appeal that for those of us in school, you can look at this issue of sexual harassment and all that. People can set up groups. You can form groups, that address these issues. Let people know that there are a group of people on this campus that say no to sexual harassment. It's very important.
That's right. That's right. That's right, sir. Because truth, like I said really, really clearly, if you go to court, no one cares about your emotions. If it's a criminal case, they want to get beyond every reasonable doubt. So at this point, to gather evidence, if in a civil case, it's the preponderance of evidence you have. So evidence is very, very, very essential. That's why before you go to court for any matter relating to fundamental rights, you must have enough evidence for that claim. Enough evidence for that claim. Okay, Mary or Deyemi, can we have your question, please?
Good evening. Please, can I be heard? Okay. So I want to ask concerning like business organizations, is it an offense in Nigeria if a business has like maybe say like particular target audience, like okay, we are doing this restaurant for, or we are establishing this restaurant for like people above 20, things like that. Like, is it a crime in Nigeria? Thank you.
I know that it's actually not a crime. There are certain businesses that are age sensitive. I recall during my master's, while I was in the UK, maybe you go to a club, for example, you don't expect that somebody below 16 years old would be in a club. So there are age restrictive businesses. Of course, if those businesses are in line with public policy, they would definitely have a right to operate without any form of inhibitions. So I wouldn't necessarily see that as discriminatory in that sense.
Okay. So what if we're talking about something that is not like age, maybe like class wise, maybe like a good example is not coming to mind, but if a business stands on the ground that we don't want this particular set or category of persons here, you understand? Is it a crime? Let's forget like age right now. Maybe something like
is it discriminatory in nature?
Yeah.
Something like that. Like we don't want people that are disabled here. We don't want people that maybe can't afford something like that. Is it like
No, but
a
someone who can't
crime?
afford it should not be there. See,
But I'm
that's
saying
why
that
you're going to
I'm not
court
having
team
like a good
on the lack of
example.
discrimination.
I'm not
Except
having a
you're
good example now
discriminating
in
based
mind.
on sex or on religion or
Abuse.
skin color.
Okay,
Now
yeah,
you're
something
having
like that.
discrimination. Because
Yes.
I think the constitution
Okay,
actually
let
had.
me.
Okay, Mr. Jada, please carry on, sir.
Please, can I just substantiate the question so that probably the question will be.
Okay.
I just want to give a typical example. Let's say, for instance, now an hospital is established mainly for females, so for female gender. Now, so assuming that a male patient is needs an urgent treatment in that particular hospital, but the person is not being attended to. So, what will be the situation in that particular?
They are gynecology hospitals, you know, right? Why would a man going to, why would a man going to a
Well,
gynecologist?
the way I see it is this. It's just like you have a male ward and you have a female ward. You know, if you now put a bed in a female ward for a man, what would he say he's looking for in a female ward? You know, that's just how maybe I'm trying to look at this, you know. But what I would add to what we've said basically is that the world is gravitating towards issues around diversity, inclusion, and all of that. So that means a lot of things to different people. And I don't want us to use this platform to elaborate so much more on that, you know. But we have scenarios where issues around diversity is one thing. That one even kind of makes a whole lot of sense to a lot of people with an African mind frame. But when you now start talking about inclusion, you know, I recall working in an office where while I was in the UK, I worked in a certain bank. Uh, three of my colleagues in the bank, you know, and how do I put it? You know, but what I'm just trying to say is that in whichever way we are trying to look at the framework of how we interact, especially on grounds of sexual orientation, on
Okay, I think Mr. Joseph is going to join us soon. Probably some issue with network. Um, can we all hear him still, or is he's frozen for everyone as well?
You can go
Okay,
Yeah, he
okay, that's
froze for
fine. Okay, I think he'll be back in no time. So Imabong actually said something to the group that makes so much sense. So I want people to know that not everything is a court case. That's the honest truth. Not everything is a fundamental human rights breach or human rights breach on its own. People have a right to diversify things, to say we want this kind of people here. But it's when they are doing it without a particular kind of reason. I could open up a restaurant and say, my restaurant only accepts ladies because it wants to be a space for women. Someone could give a reason for that. Someone as well could say, this restaurant basically is like a man cave where men can just come in to be men, have a great time, stay in. The question now is, was this person discriminated by virtue of their sex? So it's a whole lot for you to explain most of these things. But the major thing is when you're rejecting people, when you're denying people entrance into a place, you must be should I say specific enough so that you don't cross the line between necessity of that place and infringement of someone's fundamental rights. It's like someone saying, we have an all-girls school and a boy wants to gain admission in that school. Or let me tell you this way, we have an all-boys school and a girl says, I want to school here. It's clear that this is an all-boys school. And the girl says, I am being discriminated against based on my sex or my gender. It's crazy. So most often we need to be certain that that particular avenue we're bringing a case on, it fits that description. Because when the matter goes to court, everyone will bring their evidence. And when evidence meets evidence, you get to understand that, okay, this doesn't make sense. But if it's a space that on the norms, women are allowed to go in, and a particular woman is not allowed to go in, that's a problem. Or if it's a space where, okay, yes, men alone are allowed to go in there, but for no major reason. The other just says, I like attending to just men. Sometimes too, that's a private institution, but when there are no basic reasons for these things. After all, there are offices where we have just women. There are offices where they are just women, and no one is complaining. So if someone wants to have a male-dominated office where you say, okay, this office, I want to just have male staff. I don't want any female staff. Like there are times when you check on a job flyer, and all you're seeing is female this needed, male this needed. It can be very annoying. But most often, these are the things these people are looking for. So that's why you must get a human rights professional to be able to differentiate where does this fall into, and when does it fall into a fundamental rights issue based on discrimination, or where is it just a matter of preference that works for that organization. So if it's a matter of preference, fine. But where it's actually showing that there's serious discrimination, that's a problem. Okay, so I will take one question quickly. Then I think by the time Mr. Joe comes, he'll take the other human rights question. So that one is, I think that question was from, let me confirm that name. I know Imabong already sent something with regards to that to the person. Someone's asking, can only sons be allowed to represent people? So not really. I think he was trying to give an explanation to something or make an inference to that. Majorly, most people believe that when you're represented by a senior advocate, you have better chances in court. And an employee most often would not be able to afford a senior advocate. That's a whole lot of money. There's a benchmark to what they can take as least for an appearance fee. So imagine consulting a senior advocate is a lot of money. So a regular man, a regular woman would not be able to afford a senior advocate, as opposed to the corporate setting or the office that has the funds to get some of the big names in the law space. Now, these names do not come with just their name. They come with experience. They come with a whole lot. So I think he was making an inference to the fact that most of the employees might not be able to compete with the sons that these big companies might come with. Okay, Mr. Joe is back. Welcome back, sir.
Sorry, I think I had some technical issues.
Yes, sir. Okay. Yeah. So I want to go into the question that Imaba has sent earlier. She was asking, okay, sir, you must be familiar with South Korean socio-economic structures. What's your take on, I hope I get it correctly, chaebol company families not enacting humane work conditions for lower level employees, then also having very large influence on government and politics?
Before, the thing is, I'm not necessarily an expert in South Korean law and all of that, but basically what I know is that especially across Asia, there's a lot actually going on in terms of how the United Nations, that's the UNDP, is trying to push for some relaxations in some of this, in the way business is done. For example, if you look at maybe countries like Bangladesh, for example, this whole UNGP and all that, part of what influenced the UNGPs had to do with, I think there was like a very serious disaster that took place in a garment factory. People lost their lives and all of that. So those were some of the reasons why, at least today, we have the UNGP, trying to take roots across several countries, also across several continents. Asia is a very interesting continent, but the much I know about South Korea, I've been to Korea once, Korea is a beautiful place. I know that I mentioned Korea initially with respect to access to 5G and all of that. You know, that's for real. But in terms of companies that have like a very strong hold on the politics, thereby they are able to get away with certain things and all of that. You know, that's like, for me, it's a political consideration. But what I would say basically on that is that the general framework of what the UNGP is really about is to see how companies can begin to take actions that reflect their understanding of human rights norms, obligations, policies, and principles, basically. So this is I don't want to delve into a lot of academic conversations, but I know for sure that this is basically work in progress. It's work in progress. I'm trying not to be political about my answer as much as I can, but I see it as work in progress. There are several things that we know as Nigerians that we can say, okay, work in progress. Nigeria is a work in progress. So also several countries across Asia and the world is still a work in progress. There are things that we can learn from, you know, situations like that, and there are things that companies within that climb can also learn from us here in Nigeria. But finally, my final comments on that particular issue will be that I cannot speak on behalf of the Korean system.
Okay.
There are a few things I may not be able to share, but I have certain relations within that Korean space, but I can't speak. I can't share any opinions on what happens in Korea. But like I said, the major goal of the UNGP is to see that states have that duty to protect. So it's left for the Korean labor system to be able to energize that whole approach. And I'm sure that once they do, the necessary changes that result as, you know, as that engagement goes on, we'll begin to see those changes. So it's all for a better world at the end of the day. We want the world to be a better place. I'm sure that was what Michael Jackson was trying to achieve, make it a better place for you and for me and all that. So we are still hoping, we are still looking for that better world. I'm sure one day we'll find it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we can say our world is a work in progress. Okay. So I'll take another question. Someone has asked, Mr. Joseph, you are a professional and doing so well in the human rights and of course with corporations and businesses. Someone wants to know, what does it take to be in this particular field? What does one need to do to be in this field, to get to the level you are someday? What advice you have for someone who is burdened a particular pleasure or a mindset to go into this particular field? What do you advise them?
Well, the first thing I would say, for me, I delved into human rights accidentally. You know, at the time I was in the UK. I used to work in a bank, and my father thought it wise. Oh, come to Nigeria, come and settle down, come and marry. You know, all those kind of stuff. So coming to Nigeria was like a big decision. I didn't necessarily have a job in Nigeria, and somehow my background was in tech, my background was in banking, finance, fraud, and all of those things. And here was I found myself in National Human Rights Commission. It was a stark opposite from, you know, you imagine a tech lawyer, ICT, finance background, all of those things, then you're now doing human rights. Like, there was necessarily no correlation, but you know, my second year in the commission, you know, somehow I'm a spiritual guy. You know, God told me and he said, you need to leave the commission. But I was like, if I leave my job here, how am I going to survive, you know? So I stayed there for an additional 10 years before I had to take the bull by the horn and I resigned my job. And I'm happy where I am, but I know that I'll be happier where I want to get to. But back to the question, I basically feel that everything starts from the mindset. The human rights and business space in Nigeria is a new domain. Not many people. It's not like intellectual property that you have a lot of people are talking about IP, you know, things like that. So human rights and business is new, is fresh, And if you have what it takes to put in the time, you can study it on your own. You can study it on your own. Once you study the normal model that people use online, as much as you study, you start teaching other people. You study, you teach people. With time, you become an authority. You begin to now network with. In fact, there's a friend of mine in Germany who told me that there are a lot of jobs within the German space, even for Africans here in Nigeria, that they can take advantage of within this whole BHR space. So there are a lot of opportunities. There are courses you can attend. You can check out maybe dad.de, for example, is a website. You can look it up. Look out for opportunities. They are fully funded opportunities that you can attend courses on human rights and business abroad. You can do all of those things, get funding for them, things like that. So I feel that it's a wake-up call for persons who want to play in this field. You can begin to search out the opportunities. Go on LinkedIn, follow people within the space, just begin to create interactions. Once you begin to do that, your name begins to pop up in important conversations around the space. Before you know it, it could be a jackpot route, but that's just on a lighter note. But basically, I would just advise that you spend enough time studying within the field and begin to get your voice known, basically, yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Please, someone is requesting for that you also send the link you spoke about, the website. I think that.com. Please, do you mind typing it in the chat box for those who would love to check it out? And true, Imabong, a lot of times I heard that before. I know back in uni, we always hear the issue of human rights, there's no money. Human rights, there's no money. Human rights, there's no money. But funny enough, I think I have a senior colleague from university, Mr. Enibe Efyong. He's quite popular now in the Nigerian human rights space. He's doing good for himself. So who says there's no money in fundamental rights? It's just that a lot of people are lazy to take on matters when it comes to fundamental human rights.
Do you know another thing? Do you know that within oil and gas you have human rights?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It cuts across almost
do you know that
sphere.
even if you look at what I always tell people sometimes is you have to pick. What I do sometimes, I look at a law. I just go and pick a law. I just look at the law and I look at the opportunities within the law. If you look at the NIMASA Act now, for example, or the Nigerian Content Development Act and all of those things, these are already institutions that are operational. Look at their law. Look at how you can take advantage. When you look at a law, don't be reading and be looking for sections, section 25, subsection 2. Who cares about the sections? Look for the business in the law. There's business in every law. Every law you look at, search for the business, look for the loopholes, look for the opportunities within the law. Begin to make a lot of noise about it. The model has not changed. You understand? Guys, there's this, that's the Minister of Aviation. He went to my university, that's Festus Keyamo-san. The model he used to get to this level, the model still remains the same. So as young lawyers, you don't need to chase up on anybody. Look for the business in the law. Even within human rights, you are shouting, you go to jail for somebody, you will not spend the rest of your life there. You gather some beards, you come out, you take some pictures. That one too has added to your resume. You understand? So if you don't want to go that whole route, if you don't want to go through that whole route and all that, stressed out, just go to the NMPC, go to oil and gas, list out all the agencies there. What are the laws? Go to another sector, maritime, list it out. What are the laws? Begin to study the law, not to quote the sections. I'm sorry of me, I don't really do so much of litigation, so maybe that's why I'm talking like this. Study the law, not to quote the sections. Study the law for the business in the law. I tell you, if you dedicate the next 1 year before you get to final year, you know that, okay, you've studied certain laws, then begin to follow people within that space, on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a perfect example of how you can really track yourself along a path, to success and all that. And I believe that, once you adopt some of these little styles and strategies, you will find your way around people that actually matter. Before you know it, you're in the right environment, the right communication, the right opportunities, and the rest is history,
Thank you so much, Mr. Joseph. Thank you.
Thank you,
We
sir.
really appreciate this time. I would say This is one particular session where a lot of mentees do not get so motivated, but you've made today really, really worth it, like really, really worth it. And you've given us so many punchlines and things to go back to. The final one for tonight is look for the business in the law. I think many of us have never approached law like this. We just approach law based on what is needed and necessary at that time. But knowing the fact that a lot of people have carved a niche for themselves in various sectors because they looked in the law and saw the business. And what's the business in this law is what nobody else is looking at the point at that point, and what you think you can monetize in the law. So thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate that. Really, really do.
Thank you, sir.
Mentees,
Thank you very
before
much.
Mr. Joseph will take his final word for the evening, I want to encourage us once again. We found today's session really, 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 really enlightening. I want to beg of us that we make our time for our 3 sessions tomorrow. It's going to be a stretch, but listen, if you miss anything, you're missing a lot in the Jiipcc program. We're going to be discussing about CV drafting. We're going to be discussing a whole lot of amazing topics. One thing is, do not miss these opportunities. They are here for you. Make the best use of them. This is why Jiipcc has given you these opportunities. Ensure that you're making the best use of them. So I want to really request that we make out time to attend these sessions tomorrow. Do not miss anyone. Clear your schedule. Check your schedule to be certain that you're going to make it for tomorrow's sessions. And believe me, I know how much my mind has been blown by this evening session. So imagine how tomorrow's session is going to go as well, because we're having different amazing mentors come through. Do not forget as well, we're going to be having our exams soon. So if you're not in full up with classes and reading in classes, it's a whole lot. Jiipcc is no joke. Jiipcc is no joke. That's the truth. If you do not make the cut, you did not make the cut. You might have to come back next time to write with the other sets. And trust me, you don't want that. You don't want to be a spillover. No. So ensure that you get ready, read through, check out our online, go on YouTube, watch most of the videos on previous classes. Sharpen up on things you probably have learned before. You have LinkedIn, reach out to some of our lecturers or our mentors rather, who have spoken before. You can ask for further explanations. Go through your slides that you prepared and be ready for an amazing time. So for tomorrow, we're going to be looking at AFCFTA, that's an African Free Trade. Yes, we're going to be looking at fundraising for startups. Very, very important. I work with a lot of startups, and I've seen most of them go through these issues. I'm going to give you a very, very simple trick. I actually learned some things I use for my clients now from my session in Jiipcc on fundraising. And I was so blessed that I was to speak that period. I was to present for my group that particular day. And it made so much sense. It made so much sense because nowadays, when I talk to my clients, I come to them with this aura of startup lawyer that knows so much about startups and how to get funds. I got it here in Jiipcc. Like I said, Jiipcc is a gift that keeps on giving. So you want to get all this knowledge. And finally, for tomorrow, we'll be looking at HR clinic, that's CV writing and getting the best jobs. Yeah. It's not enough to have the knowledge. What makes knowledge worth it is when you're getting the best jobs that pay you good money for the knowledge you have. And most of us, we have this knowledge, but because we are not ready with regards to our CVs or applying for the right jobs, we keep on settling for less. So by tomorrow as well, you're going to be learning how to draft a killer CV, as well as applying for the best jobs, what site you can get for a job, what to expect while going for a job interview. Please, finally, ensure that you're spreading the word about Jiipcc, about the program on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram. People need to know. Mr. Joe has said, do not keep the knowledge to yourself. You need to spread it out. Just today, we spoke about human rights. I always use myself as an example. When I started writing about data protection and IP, I got mentors from that. Yes, there's a book by Mr. Olumide, one of the forefront persons in data privacy. I got his book for free from a mentor here in Jiipcc because there was this passion, even in IP space, So ensure that you're writing something, you're pushing out there. LinkedIn is your best friend. You can start writing, tag some of these organizations, tag some of these people, let them know you have knowledge in this. And trust me, you might land a job in university before you're even done because they see that you have the knowledge and they tell you we can't wait for you to be done. That's what Jiipcc does for you. Jiipcc trains the next generation of superstars in the professional sphere. So ensure that you make good use of it. So, Mr. Joseph, please, your final words for our mentees for this evening before we wrap up the session.
Yeah, I just want to say whatever your mind can conceive is actually possible, and don't see yourself as a student. If you're a student here, you are not a student. You know, somewhere in the other part of the world, maybe somewhere in the US, UK, in China, in Korea, people of your current standing are already doing great things. You know, so try to deploy as much as you can the social media tools that you have to begin to project yourself in good light. I think that's a starting point, and it's never late to start. The best time is right now. See you guys at the top. God bless you all. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So, mentees, that's a wrap for today's session, and it's been an awesome pleasure having us in this engaging and thrilling session here at Jiipcc. My name is Gustav Kamaluni, and it's been such a pleasure and honor to have moderated this particular session. I hope to see you guys tomorrow in our 3 sessions, and of course, have you guys at the closing ceremony where you get to be giving your kudos for a great job. See you and have a fantastic evening. Good night. Happy weekend.
Thank you.